Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, the place where bedtime stories don't always end sweetly. I'm Evergrey, your storyteller in the shadows. Each tale is a little strange, a little spooky, and just creepy enough to keep you peeking over the covers. So settle in, close your eyes, but don't fall asleep just yet. This is the podcast where spooky stories creep up from the soles of your shoes and leave tracks behind. Tonight's tale was inspired by someone close to me, my friend Dean, the sneaker artist behind Scandalous Customs. His custom shoes are bold, brilliant, and full of stories, and I wanted to write one that captured that magic. But what if a pair of custom shoes could remember the steps you didn't take? What if they watched you back? This is The Steps You Didn't Choose, a story about art, identity, and the quiet power of what we leave behind. And if you want to see the real shoes that inspired this episode, go check out Dean's work on Instagram at Scandalous. You won't regret it. Most people's garages smell like old oil, cardboard boxes, and forgotten bikes. Dean's smelled like paint pens, rubber, and burning ideas. The shelves on the back wall used to hold dusty holiday lights and broken garden tools, but now they were crammed with sneakers, high tops, slip-on, beat-up brands you couldn't even remember the name on anymore. Each one had been scrubbed, primed, and carefully tagged with a strip of masking taping. He hadn't set out to be known for it. The first pair he painted had been his own, white canvas shoes stained yellow from rain and dirt, with a peeling sole. He'd found them on the top shelf of a second-hand store, tossed behind a basket of unmatched flip-flops. He liked the shape of them, just enough space to tell a story. He brought them home, cleaned them with a toothbrush, and then sat on the garage floor with a set of paint markers he had gotten from his aunt for his birthday. The only one who really understood that he didn't like sports. By sunset, the shoes were covered in curling vines, bright green leaves, and teeny skulls hidden in the patterns. He hadn't meant to draw the skulls, they just sort of showed up. He wore them to school the next day, expecting no one to notice, but someone did. "Those are sick," Leo said in gym class, tugging one foot off the ground to get a better look. "You make those?" Dean just nodded. By lunch, 5 kids had asked him for a pair. By next week, it was 10. Now it was summer again, and his garage had become something between a workshop and a shrine. Some of the shoes hung from the ceiling like strange fruit. Others sat in rows on an old card table he'd sanded down himself. He didn't charge money, not really. People left what they could, sketchbooks, broken jewelry, a tin of rare buttons. One kid gave him a fox tooth. He liked it better that way. But lately, something had changed. It started small. A girl he barely knew gave him a hug after school and whispered, "Thanks for making me braver." Another boy said, "Your shoes made me fast, like really fast. I think my feet remember where I'm going before I do." Dean laughed it off. People were weird. But the weird didn't stop. More kids started coming back, not for more shoes, but to return them. Quietly, sometimes wrapped in bags, sometimes with a nervous glance over their shoulder. One pair arrived in a shoebox, taped shut, and left on his porch with no note. He found a pair he didn't remember making. They had no name tag, no laces, just a single word inside the sole, so faint he could barely read it. "Choose." Dean stared at the word for a long time, because he had a secret. Sometimes, when he was painting, it didn't feel like he was choosing anything at all. Leo had always been a little wild. He'd climbed fences instead of using gates, jumped off swings at their highest arc, spoke like the world was a competition and he was the volume champion. Dean didn't really know him, not the way people thought. But they'd been in the same class since 2nd grade, and Leo had always been loud enough to fill the space between them. So when Leo strode into Dean's garage the first Saturday of July, arms crossed and face flushed, Dean nearly dropped his paintbrush. "I want a pair," Leo announced, like he was claiming a prize. "Make them wild, like animal wild." Dean blinked. "What kind of wild?" Leo grinned. "Like tiger stripes, but not boring ones, like the stripes move, like they're watching you." Dean didn't ask questions. He never did. He just took the words people gave him and turned them into something they could wear. He found an old pair of scuffed high tops on the bottom shelf, leather, heavy, with just enough bite in the shape. He worked on them for 3 days. The base coat was the color of dried blood. Over that he layered jagged black stripes, weaving orange and gold like fire between them. On each heel he painted an emerald eye, but not the cartoon kind. Those eyes had depth, shadow, sheen, the kind that looked back at you. When Leo came to pick them up, he didn't say a word. He slid them on, flexed his toes, and grinned. "I feel fast already." He bolted down the driveway, vanishing before Dean could offer a warning. Not that he had one, not yet. At first, Dean chalked it up to Leo being Leo. But the change happened fast. By Monday, Leo was growling at the lunch monitor. By Wednesday, he tore a classmate's drawing in half for looking at him funny. He paced during math, flicked his tongue across his teeth, his eyes twitched towards sudden movement like it was hunting it. He started calling himself the Apex, refused to walk on sidewalks, said they were too tame. Dean watched this from a distance. Uneasy, there was a pull in his gut he couldn't explain. Then Friday came. Leo didn't show up to school, but he did show up to Dean's house. He didn't knock. Dean found him crouched in the garage, barefoot. The shoes sat in a plastic grocery bag beside him. "Take them back," Leo muttered, eyes wide and wild. "I can't sleep when they're in the room." Dean kneeled slowly. "What happened?" Leo didn't answer right away. He stared at the shoes like they might lunge. "When I run now," he whispered, "I don't want to stop. And when I sit still, I feel like something's watching me from inside the shoes." Dean opened the bag. The paint was scratched, but mostly intact. The tiger eyes on the heel were different. One was almost entirely black now, the green iris swallowed by a wide, predatory pupil. Dean closed the bag carefully. Leo was already backing away. "Don't make more of those." He left without saying goodbye. Dean didn't sleep that night. The bag sat in the corner of the garage, humming softly against the concrete. He didn't touch it, but the next morning, the paint on the shoes had changed again. The eyes were shut. Maya wasn't popular in the usual way. She didn't have a million friends, she wasn't loud or loud-dressed, but she always looked right. Hair in perfect waves, lip gloss shimmering like dew. People didn't whisper about her. They watched her, admired her, envied her from across the room. Dean had never spoken to her before, not until she came to the garage one golden afternoon, standing in the doorway like she'd stepped out of a magazine and onto his cracked driveway. "I heard you make shoes," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I want something that makes me seen." Dean blinked at her. "What do you mean?" She gave a tight, practiced smile. "I mean, people look at me, but they don't really see me. I want shoes that fix that, something sparkly, reflective, something people remember after I walk away." Dean nodded, but inside something tightened. There was always a want behind the ask. That's what the shoes were starting to show him. The deeper the want, the louder the shoes would get. Still, he said yes. He always did. He picked up a pair of plain white slip-ons, clean lines, flexible canvas, practically begging for transformation. He started with a silver, layering, smooth mirror-finish paint over the toes and sides. Then came the details. Teeny crushed mirror tiles embedded in resin along the heel, iridescent flicks of color that caught like glass dragonfly wings. And just under the sole, a pale ink, barely visible, Unless the shoe was tilted just right, he wrote, "Seen." When Maya returned and slid them on, the light seemed to cling to her. She twirled once, laughed, and then she took her phone and started snapping photos of herself from every angle. "They're perfect," she breathed. "They look like me, the best version of me." Dean watched her leave, glittering down the sidewalk like walking jewelry. At school the next week, Maya didn't walk, she posed. She floated into classrooms, paused in doorways, tilted her chin like there was a camera following her every step. Her voice shifted too, soft at first, then sugary and strange, like she was performing herself. "Has anyone seen Maya?" a classmate asked one day. Someone whispered, "She's always in the mirror now." They weren't wrong. By Friday, Maya had stopped hanging out with her friends. She sat alone at lunch, spinning a compact mirror between her fingers. She whispered to it sometimes, as if it answered. Dean saw her by the bathroom mirror once, just standing there, not adjusting her hair, not reapplying gloss, just staring. Mouth slightly open, like the mirror was talking back, like she didn't want to miss what it said. Then came the hallway incident. She was walking towards the lockers when one of the mirror tiles on her left shoe cracked. Just a small one, it caught on the floor and snapped in half. The scream she let out echoed through the whole building. Not because she fell, not because she was hurt, because something broke and she felt it. Dean was called into the principal's office the next day. Not in trouble, just confused. Maya's mom was there, holding the shoes in a plastic bag like they were evidence for a crime scene. "She won't take them off," she whispered. "She sleeps in them, showers with one foot hanging out of the tub. I tried hiding them, and she tore her room apart." She handed Dean the shoes. The crack in the heel tile looked like a scar. The resin had bubbled around it, warping slightly. But the worst part was the word on the sole. It had faded. Now it just said, "See." Dean took the shoes home and placed them next to Leo's. They didn't look dangerous. They didn't growl or glow, but when he turned off the lights, the resin flickered faintly like it was remembering being reflected. And when he looked too long, he thought he saw his own face smiling back, when he wasn't. Cora wasn't like the others. She didn't bang on Dean's garage door with wild requests. She didn't want fire, fangs, speed, or sparkle. She didn't even really want shoes. What she wanted was to disappear, just a little. She showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, the clouds low and bruised above them. Her sleeves swallowed her hands. A strand of hair clung to her cheek, damp from the storm that hadn't broke yet. Dean was working quietly at his table, brushing a final clear coat over a pair with flame patterns. Cora didn't say anything at first, just stood in the open doorway of the garage and watched. He looked up. "Hey!" She stepped in. "Hey!" A beat passed, then she held up a shoebox, not hers, an old one. Cardboard, faded, and edges frayed. Inside sat a pair of plain gray canvas sneakers with fraying laces and cracked soles. "Can you fix these?" she asked. Dean turned them over gently. "Yeah, I think so. Want the usual kind of stuff, cool colors, a design?" "No," she said, biting her lip. "I don't want anything flashy, nothing loud." He blinked. "Okay, then what do you want?" She hesitated, eyes tracing the scattered shoes across the shelves. "I want something that makes me feel like me, but like a quieter me, not the kind that trips over her own words in class, not the kind people remember because she wore the wrong color on photo day. She shrugged. "I want to feel like I belong." Dean looked at the shoes. They were broken, yes, but not hopeless. He nodded slowly. "I can do that." And he did. He painted them with mossy greens and soft purples like the edges of a hidden garden. A thread of peachy gold curled around the soles like vines. He kept it subtle, blended, gentle, layered in washes until the canvas looked soft in the eye. Inside the tongue, he stitched a single line in fine thread. "You are enough." He didn't tell her it was there. Some things are meant to be found only when you really need them. When Cora picked them up, she didn't smile wide, she didn't clap or squeal. She just breathed out like something inside her had loosened. "These are," she whispered, "these are really me." She wore them to school the next day, and she was different, but not in the way the others had been. She didn't walk faster, she didn't glow, she just felt more present, like she wasn't hiding behind herself anymore. For a few days, Dean let himself believe maybe he'd done something good, until the shoes came back. Cora brought them in a brown paper bag, her eyes not quite meeting his. "What happened?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Nothing bad, not really. They didn't twist me or make me act weird, but when I wore them, I felt like they were waiting. Waiting for what?" "I don't know," she hesitated. "I feel like the shoes were looking for something, not changing me, just watching me, decide who I want to be, like they wanted to nudge me." Dean stared at her. "I think they were kind," she said, "but not empty, and that's the part that scared me." He nodded and took them back. As she turned to go, she paused in the doorway. "Dean," she asked, "do you know what's inside them, the ones you make?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say no. Instead, he just said, "Not always." Cora gave a small nod. "Then maybe it's time you found out." And then she left him alone in the garage, holding a pair of shoes that suddenly felt much heavier than before. Dean had never made himself a pair. Not really. That first test pair, the ones with vines and skulls, had been an accident more than a design. They were what had started it all. But they didn't count. They were curiosity, a trial, a brushstroke made without thought. But now, after Leo and Maya and Cora, and a dozen other pairs that had been returned or left behind, Dean stood alone in the garage, surrounded by shoes that whispered like old leaves. And for the first time, he wanted to know not just what the shoes did to others, but what they would do to him. It felt like a dare, one only he could answer, so he chose carefully. He picked up a pair of unlabeled sneakers, black leather, smooth and blank as a sealed journal. The insides were soft but cold. No name had ever been written inside. They'd waited longer than the others. Dean didn't draw a plan. He didn't sketch the design. He simply started painting. Wings, not angel wings, not pretty feathers. These were dark, sharp-edged, like they'd been dipped in soot and smoke, like the outer soles shimmered with white and gray strokes, like clouds during a storm. On the toe of the left shoe, he painted a swirling spiral. On the right, an open eye with no iris, just light. And then the laces. Not the usual faded ones from the thrift bin. He dug through his drawer until he found them. A coiled pair of glow-in-the-dark laces, pale green in daylight and ghostly when the shadows fell. He hadn't remembered owning them. As he threaded them through the gleaming silver eyelets, the room felt hushed, thicker, like the shoes were watching every knot. And when he flipped off the light to see how they looked, his breath caught. The laces glowed softly in the dark, like they weren't just tied, but lit from within, each loop traced with eerie precision, each end glowing like it knew where he was going. It didn't feel like style, it felt like guidance, or a trap. Still, he slipped the shoes on. The moment his feet touched the soles, the world tilted. It wasn't dizziness, it wasn't a rush, it was alignment. Like something had been waiting for him to wear them. He stood straighter, blinked less. His breath came deeper. A calm he didn't know he'd been missing wrapped around his shoulders like a heavy coat. He felt taller, not physically, but in the way that trees feel taller even when you can't see the roots. Dean walked around the garage, then out of the driveway. The shoes didn't squeak, they didn't scuff, they moved with him. And as he walked, the air around him seemed to hush. No birds, no traffic, no wind. It was like the world was listening. That night, Dean didn't eat dinner. He didn't sleep. He walked. He walked for miles, down sidewalks he didn't know, through alleyways that felt familiar, across parks and playgrounds where shadows stretched longer than they should have. And every time he thought about stopping, the shoes pulled. Not hard, not mean, just a suggestion in the soles. There's more. Keep going. At some point, he felt himself outside the school. Every light inside was off. The glass doors reflected the soft glow of a spiral painted on his toe, and the glowing laces curling like vines of light. He stepped closer, and that's when he saw his reflection. But it wasn't him. It wore his face, yes, but the expression was wrong. Too still, too perfect. Like a wax figure version of Dean. Something rehearsed, something finished. He stepped back. The image followed. The shoes whispered, not in words but in feelings. This is who you could be. He ripped them off. Fell backwards onto the pavement, gasping. The moment they left his feet, the night sounds returned. Winds through trees, a distant car, the thrum of his own pulse. Dean sat there, barefoot and shaking, staring at the shoes. They looked harmless, beautiful even, but something inside them was building him a version of himself he hadn't asked for. He carried them home in silence, didn't put them on again, didn't even look at them the next morning, but by then something had already shifted. Because when Dean walked into the garage the next day, every single painted toe turned slightly on its shelf to face him. The next order came without a knock. No voice, no face, just a box on the garage table. Dean hadn't heard anyone come in, hadn't left the door unlocked, but when he came back from brushing paint off his jeans in the laundry room sink, it was sitting there, square, neat, wrapped in twine like an old-fashioned package from a fairy tale. There was no note, just a word scrawled on the top in thick black ink, "Finish." Dean stared at it for a long time. He didn't touch it right away. Something about the word made his skin itch, like a dare wrapped in twine. Eventually, curiosity won. He opened it slowly. Inside were a pair of shoes, not old, not his. These weren't the kind of shoes he used. These were perfect. Untouched white leather, silver eyelets that gleamed like they'd never known fingers, soles that hadn't kissed dirt or sidewalk. But the strangest part was that they were already half-painted. One shoe bore swirling black ink across the toe, curling like smoke towards the tongue. The other had a glimmer of pale gold along the heel, fading into symbols Dean didn't recognize, symbols that shimmered faintly when turned towards the light. His stomach twisted. He hadn't painted these, and yet the brushstrokes looked like his. The layering, the pressure, the design language, it all looked familiar, in the same way dreams sometimes feel like memories. He reached for them and hesitated. The moment his finger brushed the surface, the symbols shifted. They responded to him. Dean yanked his hand back. Something was wrong. These weren't just shoes. These weren't just waiting for paint. They were waiting for him. The word on the box burned in his thoughts. Finish. Who had sent them? Why? He looked around the garage, suddenly paranoid. The corners felt darker, the racks of shoes, silent watchers before, now seemed to be leaning forward ever so slightly, listening. Dean swallowed hard. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't, but he started painting anyways. Not with a plan, not with a color scheme, just instinct, muscle memory. His hands moved with him. He added indigo across the arch, streaks of silver along the sides like moonlight behind bars, a circle on top of the right shoe, 3 lines on the left. Each stroke made the symbols pulse, not with light, but with soundless intent. He didn't know what the shoes were becoming, but he knew deep in his chest, where fear pretends to be fascination, that they weren't for just anyone. They were meant for something, for someone. And the moment he finished, the shoes shimmered once, then went still. Dean backed away. He turned off the light, locked the garage for the first time in months, went to bed with socks on. But when he woke the next morning, the shoes were gone. And in their place, sitting neatly on the table, was a slip of paper. Just one word, written in his own handwriting. Soon. Dean stopped taking orders. He stopped answering messages, closed the garage and put a tarp over the table, piled all the painted shoes into boxes, each one sealed and taped and labeled in his neat, blocky handwriting. But even boxed, they didn't stop humming. There was no sound, not really, just a sense of pressure, like the air got heavier around them, like they wanted to be worn again. But Dean was done letting them choose. He was going to fix it, all of it, so he made a list, every name, every pair, and he walked. First step, Leo. He found him behind the rec center, shooting hoops with headphones on. His hair was longer now. His knuckles were scabbed. His eyes flicked towards Dean before he even waved. "I don't want 'em back," Leo said. "I'm not here to give them back to you," Dean replied. "I just need to know if they're still affecting you." Leo paused. Then, after a long moment, "They don't live in my room anymore. But I still run at night. I don't sleep much, and sometimes I still feel claws in my dreams." Dean's throat tightened. I think they woke something up," Leo added, "and I don't know if it's mine or theirs." Dean thanked him and left. Next, Maya. She'd moved schools. Dean found that out from her cousin, who had said Maya had started wearing only soft, fuzzy slippers, hated anything that reflected light. "She covers her mirror with scarves now," the cousin whispered. "Says they show too much." Dean crossed her name off the list. Cora met him halfway. She'd been waiting, it turned out. "I knew you'd come back," she said, walking beside him along the edge of the forest trail behind their street. "You looked different after you wore them. Quieter, not in a good way." Dean nodded. He didn't try to deny it. "I never stopped thinking about what you said," he admitted. "About them watching, about them waiting?" "They still are," Cora said. "And I don't think it's just the shoes." Dean froze. "What do you mean?" She looked at him carefully. "Have you checked your name?" "What?" "Where you wrote it, inside the pair you made. Have you looked at it lately?" He hadn't. He ran home. He pulled the box off the shelf, tore open the lid. The shoes sat perfectly still, calm as stone. But when he lifted the tongue and looked where his name had been written, it was gone. No smudge, no ink stain, just clean canvas. Dean's name had vanished, and beneath it, in letters that shimmered silver gray, a new word had formed. Maker. He dropped the shoe. They weren't just changing people, they were replacing them, piece by piece, step by step. And if the shoe had no wearer, they waited until someone fit, until someone cracked open wide enough for the voice inside the paint to slip through. Dean looked around the garage, all the boxes, all the souls, all the carefully painted symbols. He hadn't been creating art. He had been building doors, and something was starting to walk through. Dean didn't sleep that night. He sat in the garage with all the boxes piled around him like walls. The paint markers lay silent, the brushes stiff in their jars, but the air pulsed, like the space itself was breathing, waiting, wanting. They were all watching him now, every pair, even boxed, even taped shut. They knew. He could feel it in the soles of his feet, in the beat of his heart, in the strange emptiness behind his eyes when he looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the face looking back. The shoes hadn't just been changing the kids who wore them. They had been testing him. Each pair he painted was a seed, a signal, a step towards something he hadn't meant to summon. But now it was here, and it wanted a final pair. Not to be sold, not to be worn, but to be finished. He didn't remember deciding to do it. He just woke up on the floor at dawn, paint already under his fingernails, brushes scattered and a blank pair sitting in front of him. No laces, no thread, just smooth, flawless white leather. They weren't thrifted. He'd never seen them before, and yet they were his. He didn't sketch, didn't think, he painted. One stroke at a time, guided by something that lived just beyond thought. Symbols he didn't understand filled across the surface. Shapes that looped and locked, spiraled and split. They shimmered even in shadow. In the tongue in the left shoe, he painted a circle within a circle. In the right, a mirror. And when he finished, he blinked. His hands trembled. He hadn't written a name inside them, but something was already there. In faint letterings, silver and strange. Dean, Maker, Chosen. He backed away. "No," he whispered, "I didn't choose this." But the shoes only shimmered. You don't wear the final pair, you become it. Dean turned, ran, out the garage, down the street, across the schoolyard where kids were starting to gather. Cora stood near the swings watching. He stumbled towards her, breath ragged. "They want to use me," he gasped. I think I opened something. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make art." Cora didn't flinch. "I know," she said gently, "but sometimes what we make makes us back." Dean sank to the ground. The shoes weren't just conduits. They were invitations, and he was the final guest. He couldn't take back the others, but maybe he could close the door. So he made one last decision. That night, he returned to the garage. He stacked the shoes in a circle, every pair. Leo's, Maya's, Cora's, even the unfinished ones, even the ones that had changed their names without him. In the center, he placed the final pair. He took off his socks, stood barefoot on the concrete, and lit the circle. Not with fire, with ink. He poured every last bottle of paint he had across the floor. Swirling, chaotic, beautiful. He dipped his hands in, pulled streaks of color into runes he didn't know how he knew. The shoes glowed, the air split open like a curtain in the wind, and just for one moment, Dean saw the space between choices, where art becomes invitation, where identities flicker, where steps once taken cannot be undone. Then he stepped back, and the shoes collapsed inward, one by one, like a folding fabric, a hush of leather, a breath held too long, until there was nothing left on the floor but a single painted circle and Dean alone. The garage is quiet now. The shelves hold bolts and screws, not stories. Dean still paints, but only on canvas. Only things he can name. When kids ask why he doesn't do shoes anymore, he just smiles quietly because he knows the truth. He didn't stop. He just closed the door. But sometimes when he walks past mirrors, he swears he can still hear footsteps behind him. Soft, certain, familiar. Footsteps wearing shoes that were never sold, never worn, and never meant to be made. Thanks for listening to The Steps You Didn't Choose. Dean's garage is quiet now. The shelves are empty, the shoes are gone. But some art doesn't stay where you leave it. So if you ever find a pair of sneakers with your name written inside, and you didn't write it, think carefully before you put them on. Because sometimes what we make starts making us, and not every step can be taken back. Stay tuned for your fear fact. Did you know that many artists throughout history have claimed their greatest work didn't come from them, but through them? Writers describe losing time while the words appear on the page. Painters talk about their hands moving before they know what they're painting. Musicians say they hear songs in dreams and wake up already humming the tune. Some call it flow, some call it muse, and some believe that creativity is a kind of possession, a quiet takeover of the mind by something unseen. But here's the unsettling part. Research shows that when we enter deep creative states, the brain begins to suppress part of the self, specifically the areas that manage identity and control. It's what allows us to lose ourselves in art. But if we're not there, who's painting? Now imagine this. Every time you draw, write, build, or design, you're creating not just art, but a kind of mirror, a map, a reflection of your inner world, but also a door, one that shows others what you want, what you fear, what you might become. And what if something sees that door? What if something slips through it? Because not every work of art is just self-expression. Some pieces start watching back. Some stories start writing you, and some shoes might remember every step you didn't take. So next time, if you get the urge to make something you can't explain, a shape that feels just right, a word that shows up again and again, and a pair of glowing laces you don't remember buying, look closer, because there's a difference between making art and being chosen to finish it. Thank you for listening to Sleep Tight Frights. It means more than you know, to us and to the things that listen back. I'm Evergrey, your guide through the shadows, and if you felt something was watching as the story unfolded, you're not alone. They remember the ones who listen, they wait for the ones who return. So come back soon. Sleep tight if you can.